Hi guys, my name's Morgan Fox and I just wanted to talk to you about the British East India Company. So Portugal and Spain was dominated by the spice trade in the East Indies, and with the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the British and the Dutch were able to more actively trade in the East Indies. In order to compete, the British Queen, gave permission to trade in the East Indies to over 200 merchants. One of these groups was the British East India Company. The company began humbly as a group of investors and merchants who were seeking wealth through trade. The first few voyages turned quite profitable, but increased competition, wars, pirates, and lower profits made trade much more difficult. Rather than continuing to compete with the Dutch, the British East India Company abandoned spices in favor of textiles such as cottons and silks. The company's ships first arrived in India in 1608. The British gradually overtook the Portuguese, and many English communities and trading posts developed in towns along the Indian coasts. This focus on textiles allowed the company prosperity. By the 1700s, the company had grown immense. It even had its own army. In 1757, the company was faced with a local uprising. Robert Clive led the army and quickly defeated the uprisers. At this point, the company began to shift its power and tax anyone within its boundaries, bringing in a lot of revenue. This was followed by a lot of hardship for the people of Bengal. The uprising transformed Bengal from rich to desolate, as well as the excessive taxation. Then the famine in 1769 to 1770 took about a third of the Bengal population. The company found itself turning towards military methods more and more, and believed destruction was imminent. To save the company, the state intervened, and a parliamentary bill allowed for greater parliament control of the company, and it also placed India under the rule of a British Governor-General. This leader had less of an administrative rule and ruled more directly than just the company had. At this point, the company still existed, but Britain had a much tighter leash around it. Under the first Governor-General, British rule over India greatly expanded. For the next 50 years, the British tried to eliminate Indian rivals. Under Wellesley's administration, the company ruthlessly expanded their control. They won major victories in a series of wars that led to the company occupying all of India. In some places, Britain practiced indirect rule, allowing native princes to domestically rule their land. These princes were only allowed to continue ruling their land if they continually had male heirs and were considered fit to rule. That is, a prince must have a male heir upon his death to keep the territory in his family. The company also could decide the prince was unfit to rule if they did not believe he cared for the welfare of his subjects. By the mid-18th century, the company began to change directions. The Industrial Revolution nullified the point of the textile trade. The garments that were made in India that had made the company so successful were now easily mass-produced due to factories. In addition, people were much more interested in Chinese tea. But the Chinese would only trade their tea for silver, and this was something the company didn't really have access to. Britain traded in gold standard, meaning they'd have to go to the European continent for silver, making the tea trade unreasonable. Rather than using the silver, the company used opium. The company grew opium in India and exchanged it for Chinese tea. This illegal trade led to the Opium War. Although this trade was illegal, this was how the company became truly wealthy. While fighting in the wars, the company faced rebellion. In 1857, the Indians killed many British soldiers and civilians. The company retaliated, killing thousands of Indians, rebels, and sympathizers. The combination of annexations, as I mentioned with the princes, taxes, and harsh conditions contributed to this rebellion. The rebellion of 1857 spelled the end of the company. The British Crown took over and overtook all of the company's territories and powers. The company was dissolved in 1858, and the British Crown now ruled the entire subcontinent. This was the beginning of the British Raj. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you learned something, and here's my works cited. Thank you.